Hello.
Hey, how
Hey
are you?
everybody. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. How are you, Rizèl? How's your day going?
I'm good. Sorry for interrupting you. My day's going good. It's pretty warm today, so I'm happy. How's your day going?
Also toasty and also happy. I'm not complaining. Not complaining at all. Um Folks from wherever you're joining, if it's night, if it's morning, if it's afternoon, hope you're all doing great. Thank you so much for joining in as always. If you're joining in for the first time, we're doing a little bit of, we call it talk practice, but it's a whole lot of things related to public speaking, to tech speaking. Yuri Kotzbach, it's afternoon here. Yuri Kotzbach, hi. How are you? Good to see you. It's afternoon here. Yeah, so probably across the pond from Europe, I'm guessing. Which reminds me, I need, hold up. How could I forget? My talk practice
Oh
notebook.
yeah.
But results. So as I was saying, like we're doing a whole bunch of stuff related to public speaking. So this can be practicing a talk. This can be brainstorming a talk. Do you remember that one we did with?
It starts with a T.
Oh no,
Dang it.
this happened last time I
Oh
mentioned her.
no. Hold on.
I'm awful. We had somebody on who we brainstormed to talk from the very beginning, and what a heartwarming, great session that was, wasn't it?
Yeah, I loved it. It was awesome that in that
Trisha.
amount of time, Trisha, yeah, in that amount of time we were able to come up with something, and she had such great ideas like in the first place. She just needed, some reassurance.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to like give folks a space so they can either practice or brainstorm or structure as we I'm spoiling a little bit of what we're doing today. um so before we get started, couple things of note. This is a stream because we want all of us to collaborate. So please bring your ideas, bring your thoughts. However, we practice kindness here. Niceness is good, but kindness is even more appreciated. That is constructive, good feedback that conforms with our code of conduct, which I shall be posting. And really, I gotta get off my butt and shorten this link because it is long. But yeah, so please make sure you have a look at that. And yeah, Rizèl, shall we? Do you want to introduce our guest today?
Sure. Our guest today is Dan Moore. I believe he's the director. You could correct me if I'm wrong. Director of Developer Relations at Fusionoff.
Head of DevRel, but
Oh,
yeah,
head
yeah,
of DevRel.
yeah.
Okay, that sounds even more fancy. But yeah. Hey
Yeah.
Dan, what's up?
Hey, thanks for having me today.
It
Happy-
is
yeah.
sorry. I just wanted to say it is so good to have you here, Dan. We've been planning this one since early February, I want to say.
Yeah.
So it feels pretty cathartic to finally do the session with you. How are you today? Where are you tuning in from, Dan, if I may ask?
Yeah, I'm in Boulder, Colorado, USA. So,
Mountain
uh,
time.
yep, working Mindy land. Yep.
Lovely. Lovely. Well, before we start talking about your talk, I'd love to give you the opportunity, if I may, to ask you to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about like what you're working on, Fusion, and all of that. Your DevRel
Sure.
work.
Sure, yeah. So, again, thanks for having me. I am head of DevRel at Fusionoth, and at Fusionoth, we're an identity provider similar to Auth0 or Okta. You may have heard of those companies. They're kind of the big fish in the pond. And I have been a developer for about 20-ish years.
Wow.
And a couple of years ago, had the chance to move into DevRel. And so today I get to talk to people about authentication and authorization and how they should use standards-based solutions like FusionAuth to help accelerate their application development and make their users more secure.
And you run letters to new developers.
I did. I
Yeah.
did.
What's that?
And Rizèl kindly contributed something. So this was a passion project I started in 2018. And basically, it's a blog that got turned into a book. And it's basically short, 1 minute to 10-minute long articles that are basically advice that I wish I'd had when I was starting out as a developer.
Oh, wow. I think I got the URL. I'm going to throw it into the chat. Please let me know if I got the wrong one. It's a letters to a new developer.com.
That's it.
Oh, lovely. Here, I'm gonna highlight it here so that y'all can see it. Letters to newdeveloper.com. This is really cool, and this is something that I really appreciate when I talk to folks who are doing contributing to the public speaking space or to the tech community itself. This sort of like penchant for wanting folks to not fall into the same traps that they did when they were starting out.
Well, and one of the funnest things, so the first couple of years, it was really kind of me talking. And then over the last couple of years, I've been able to get people like Rizèl or other folks who brought their own perspective. And that's been
That's
super
amazing.
fun because, I have a certain career trajectory and I'm a certain kind of person who's been in a certain space. And the advice I give to some people may be wrong or it may not resonate with them. So it's been a super fun project.
That's really cool, and I think that's something that's so critical when we're giving advice and mentoring is that sort of like, look, these are the tips that I would have needed when I was starting out from my perspective, from my position. So super cool to have that, to be aware of that.
Definitely.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I won't keep us. So here's what we're going to be doing today, folks. As said, Dan's got a talk for us. You see the title in the title. You see the title. No, you do not see the title in this stream, in the stream title. So the talk you have for us is titled. It's not in our Google Doc just yet, but we tweeted about it in the image. Your app's front door authentication architectural patterns. And Dan, I'd love to hear. You said you were going to be giving this one shortly in the future. Is that correct?
Yeah, so and this would be interesting to get your feedback on because I know you both of you are experienced public speakers, but I've learned that I already have a talk written, then it's great to submit it. But if I don't have a talk written, it's still okay to submit an abstract as long as I present enough detail and I feel like I can speak to it, right? I wouldn't present an abstract about machine learning in Portuguese because I don't have the experience for that. But there are things that there are definitely plenty of talks I've submitted where if it doesn't get accepted, I won't write the talk this time, right? So that's
That's
what this was. Sorry.
no. Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted you. That's such an important nugget of advice, and thank you for pointing it out, Dan. How when we submit talks to conferences, we don't have it fully written out yet. Like we have, like you said, an abstract, an idea of what we're going to present, a set of takeaways, a set of questions, a set of challenges that we're going to talk about. So that's really good advice if you're starting out. Is that you don't have to have it. I don't think I've ever submitted a talk that I had fully written out. Now that I think about it.
Yeah. I will say I've submitted some talks, but I think it also depends on the size of the conference and like the pedigree of
Yeah,
the conference and all kinds of other aspects, and also how experienced a speaker you are and how much you are a name or things like that. But for all the listeners out there, you know, if you feel like you can talk about something and you can outline it, then a lot of conferences I think will definitely take a look at it because they're not expecting. I have, I guess this would be another question for you all. I can only think of one conference where I actually had to submit the talk ahead of time, and even then, it was like a month ahead of time. It wasn't at the time I
oh
submitted for the talk.
yeah, I
I have
think.
had
Go
that.
ahead, Rizal.
Oh no, I was gonna say I have had that, but that's so hard for me because sometimes I like make the talk a week before.
That's gonna be tough unless you have a time machine.
Yeah, totally. I think for me, especially in 2021, when I gave a lot of online talks, a lot of conferences asked me to pre-record my talk, which was in of itself. I was actually just talking about this to a friend today about the experience between pre-recording a talk by yourself and sending a video to the online conference versus having someone be there with you to record the talk.
Mhm.
And it's funny, like this is off topic, and I'm so sorry, but I think it's kind of interesting. Where I'm planning to do a meetup with someone where they will give a pre-recorded talk next week, and I had assumed that we were going to pre-record it together. So when I followed up with this person to be like, "Hey, so when do you want to pre-record this week?" and they're like, "Oh, hey, sorry, I kind of assumed I was just going to send you a video," and I was like, "Oh yeah, you can do that."
Sure.
Yeah.
How was that experience different? I mean, is it just like having a person in the room, basically, is the big shift?
Yeah, at least, sorry, I don't want to dominate this
Mm.
conversation too much. I just think it's interesting. I think for me, it felt like if there's somebody there, then I'm giving it to that person at least, to at least one person, where instead of giving it to a video, if that makes any sense. I'm very much of the type that I can be on stream and make mistakes for an hour and a half, no problem at all. But if I have to make a 2-minute video, I got to block out 4 hours for that.
Mm.
I wouldn't call it perfectionism per se, but it's definitely like, oh, I can do a better take than that. Ooh, and I love what Learner 0418 is saying here. I'm really thankful to online streams and conferences, and a lot of this comes down to like accessibility, not just like, of course, accessibility in terms of like being able to get signing and captioning, but also like resource, location,
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Accessibility is so valuable. But Rizèl, Dan, I'd love to hear from the two of you. What's it like? What's that distinction like for you?
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. When I'm by myself, I'm just like, oh man, I messed up the way I said that word. I'm just gonna re-record it again. And then it's like 7 hours later. Anytime my job, like a lot of my teammates, they make like TikToks and stuff like that. I'm like, I'll just do a blog post because this TikTok's gonna take forever. But yeah, I agree about like I know a lot of people don't like online conferences, but I do think it's helpful because it can reach people in other regions that may not have been able to afford the conference or being able to like do all the visa stuff just to get down there. So I do like them for that reason. And I know people say they can't really connect that well with the people online, but I haven't had a hard time. If someone's in the chat, I'll talk with them. I don't know. I think it's just like being able to stop and not just read your slides and be like, "Oh, hey, what do y'all think?" or get the audience that's watching online to interact with you.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Rizèl, about online conferences being, letting people have a lot of access. And uh, I have not had a great experience connecting with folks, but I think it's a trade-off. And I think we actually, at my meetup, we've started doing, we've done a couple of, so I help run the Boulder Ruby meetup in
Oh,
Colorado,
cool.
and we had a couple of people Zoom in before the pandemic even started, and that was because it's a lot cheaper and easier to ask someone who's a name in the Ruby community if they want to spend an hour on their Wednesday night as opposed to flying in and talking and then leaving. Cheaper for us, easier for them. But since the pandemic, we've recorded almost every session, and we actually are building up a library of useful information. So to me, that's a trade-off. And I would not want to go entirely online conferences, but I wouldn't want to go entirely not either, because having those videos recorded is just so great.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And a lot of for me, the whole thing about online conferences is kind of comes down to the level of online interaction that goes down. I find that when there's a lot of chats, when there's a lot of questions, when there's a lot of interaction, when you invite folks as an organizer, when you motivate and help create a space where folks can feel comfortable and involved, I find that really compelling. And I find it's funny you mentioned Boulder Ruby, because I think for me, one of my favorite ones was, and I didn't expect this, to be honest with you, was RailsConf 2021. They had a video on demand system for it, for the talk, so you could watch the talks at any, except for the keynotes, but you could watch the talks at any time. But they built in a functionality for what are they called? Watch parties. So you could like generate a link and give it to folks so you could watch it together. So people would just go and make like little Zoom calls where they just watch the talks together. And you know what? That was awesome. I really liked it. And I like what Yudi says here as well. It's just a different type of interaction. And I think that's very fair. And like Learner 0418 says, that inclusiveness makes a huge difference. Cool. I'm so sorry to take us off topic. I'm curious to know, Dan, what is it okay to ask? Like, what kind of conference are you giving this talk at?
Sure. I think it's allowed. I'm giving it KCDC.
Oh, nice. Lovely.
Yeah.
You two are going to get to meet in person.
Well, that's actually, we met last year
We
at
met,
KCDC. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm envious, not jealous. I'm envious.
Yeah. And as far as I understand KCDC, I mean, I talked last year, although it was a sponsored talk.
Hmm.
And to me, it actually is an interesting venue because lots of times talks will be like 40, 30 or 40 minutes and then some questions. And I got done with my talk at like 45 minutes and took some questions. And somebody came up to me later and said, your talk was great. It just wasn't long enough. Like it feels like KCDC, they
Oh.
want like that full 60 minutes to be
Oh.
talk. So I definitely am going to plan to do that better this time.
Yeah, that hour, I was like, "Oh my gosh." But I think it went well because I tried to let people interrupt me or ask questions in between, so then it
Hmm.
stretched out the talk even longer.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And out of curiosity, is it sort of, does it accommodate that kind of like flow of like, hey, feel free to ask a question in the middle of the talk? The conference itself, I mean.
Oh, they don't have, like, rules, I don't think. It was just
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty friendly. I mean, it's your typical like you're up in front of a room, but the room sizes that I was in at least weren't too big. There were 30 or 50 people kind of thing, so it was easy to ask for
Yeah.
feedback.
Amazing.
And I do think they give you like blocks of time to move between sessions too afterwards, which obviously is important. If you're going to run up to the very end of the hour, you need to have 15 minutes to go someplace else. So,
Excellent. Cool. No, thank you so much for giving us the background. I think what we can do now is I will share my screen where we've got a Google Doc where we've got Dan, we've got your title, your abstract, some use cases. Oh, you've got the track and the level. Very cool. So what I figured we could do today is sort of like collaborate on building out. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. Sort of like a flow, a structure, some ideas for topics to bring up, that sort of thing. Does that sound helpful?
yeah, I think so one of the things I'd love to do here is,
Yeah.
I pitch this as an advanced talk.
Mm.
And, my question is how advanced is advanced? And both of you are experienced developers, right? And speakers. So, you know, uh, for me, advanced around a topic I know a lot about is different than advanced around something that I know less about. So I'd love to have some feedback. And it's also an architecture talk, right? So I'm probably not going to be showing code blocks. I might be showing some diagrams and things like that, but like that kind of feedback I think would be really helpful, as well as just, hey, here are some topics I think would be interesting for us for you, Dan, to explore further.
Wonderful. Yeah. Cool. Then I will bring up the Google Doc. Can everybody see?
Oh, and
Uh,
also the audience too, right? I don't
Please.
know how experienced your audience is, but I'd love to have your feedback too, right? Like, does this feel like the right thing for an advanced architecture kind of talk, or is it too simplistic, or is it too in the weeds? So,
Fantastic. Yeah, no, please. I said, this is a live stream for that very purpose. Like, we're all here to collaborate together. I do have a favor to ask of everybody watching. I'm going to bump this up maybe once more. If the font size is still too small, please at any point feel free to let us know. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat. Um, and this is great. Learner 0418 says this is very advanced for me, honestly, which is good. Like this is something that's advanced for me too. So I think advancedness can be relative to a certain extent. So, that's why we're gonna dive into this. So I'll tell you what, everyone, how do we feel? Would it be okay, just so we're all sort of on the same page, for me to read this out loud? And Dan, I would invite you to please sort of walk us through what you have in mind, and I'll just take some notes as I go. Does that sound good? Yeah, fantastic. So the title is Your App's Front Door, Authentication Architectural Patterns. And the abstract is authentication is the front door to your application, but it is often overlooked in favor of more exciting and differentiated features. But auth is worth thinking about. There are battle-tested standards, interesting edge cases, and security risks. In this talk, you'll learn about common authentication patterns building on standards like OIDC, JWT, and SAML. These patterns are drawn from hundreds of customer implementations. Examples of patterns such as the backend for frontend and identity broker will be diagrammed and dissected. I mean, I'm smiling because I'm at that sort of like, I know some of these words stage right now. You'll also learn when to apply these patterns and what gotchas to watch out for. At the end of this talk, you'll be able to map identity problems and to common architectural patterns and solutions. Cool to open this?
Yeah, that's a public repo.
Fantastic. Thank you. Y'all can't see it. Share this tab. Oh, wow. Oh, this is handy. You can switch which tab you're sharing.
Nice.
List of auth use cases. Cool. So we've got a list of different types of authentication use.
So I'll just, I mean, real quick, like this talk is something I've pitched multiple times before, and so you can see from this GitHub issue that I started this in 2020, and so I've been just kind of cataloging, like, use cases are different than patterns, right? But they're still related, and so I've just been cataloging things over the last couple of years wherever I run across them, and it's not complete by any means, but that's just why I thought it was useful to toss in here.
Yeah, fantastic. Out of curiosity, would this be something that you'd also want folks to contribute to as well?
Yeah, if someone wants to add another auth use case to this, that would be fantastic for sure.
I'll go ahead and throw this into the chat if I may.
Of course.
Awesome. AML, OIDC integration layer.
I never really thought of authentication having different use cases. I was just like log in and then log out. But you're right. There's like you're saying, single sign-on and all these other different things in device authorization. Interesting.
General app gateway. Fantastic. Yeah, cool. Yeah. So folks, if you have any other use cases or patterns you'd like to share, please go ahead and do so. So cool. So you've been thinking about and pitching this talk for a while, and please forgive my nosiness. Is this the first time you get it accepted?
Yep. Otherwise, I would have had it written already, right? And I would have just modified it a little bit. But
that's the fair point.
yeah. I mean, I would say I probably pitched it 3 or 4 times to different conferences. I haven't pitched it every month for the last 2 years and gotten shut down. But yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah, how exciting.
It is exciting.
I'm so happy for you. So cool. So you've got some ideas of what you would like to, I mean, first of all, super excited for this because these are, like, for example, I think of these, if I may just share my gut feeling or my gut reaction, is I know JWT.
Me too.
Yeah. Is it Java Web Tokens or JavaScript Web Tokens?
It's JSON Web Tokens.
JSON, see? Okay, I sort of know this one, JWT. And I've seen SAML or SAML. I don't even know how to say that correctly.
Yeah, SAML.
I feel like I've seen OIDC.
That's built on, it's built on top of OAuth. You probably are more familiar with OAuth. But OIDC is the same thing. So yeah.
Yeah. And this question of it being advanced and how in depth to go, my gut reaction is, or whenever I give a talk talking about advanced topics, which is not a lot of the time, my instinct is to define the heck out of everything. But I find that, so there's going to be a couple of backs and forth of, Aaron McHale is here. Hey, Aaron, good to see you. We're talking about, we're going through Dan's talk on authentication patterns, which authentication architectural patterns. Yeah, but so I'm going to go a little bit back and forth on this because an hour gives you a lot of time to go in depth about defining some of these topics. And because I think because despite this being an advanced talk, this gives you the space you need to, oh, good point. Thank you. This gives you the space you need to be able to go as in-depth as you want in terms of, for example, defining as many things as you like, defining as many things as you can, but not going too in depth about them, if that makes sense.
Mm. You mean like, for example, like saying, hey, you may have heard of SAML. Here's what SAML does. Maybe spending a minute or two on SAML, not diving too
Yeah.
deep into it, but like doing that. Is that what you mean by defining but not going too in depth? Or
Yeah, that's my instinct here. But please, this is a stream. Folks in the chat, please feel free to. This is a conversation, so please feel free to give your opinions.
Yeah, I agree, because even though you did label it as an advanced talk, there might be some people who hop in they're beginners, and they're like, what are the words you're saying? So yeah. And I feel like authentication is not like a commonly known topic, like in depth of developers. Like I feel like we know just enough to have someone be able to log in and then log out, and then we're like, hopefully that worked.
sure, sure, okay.
Yeah, for example, Learner here says simplify things to a point where the audience gets an overview, and I think that's a good way to go about it. And Aaron agrees. Yes, same. I'm also technically a senior person, so self-taught. Yeah, I think, and it's tricky because, like, Dan, you work in authentication, so there's a. I want to be very careful about my words here. There's a danger of going into the what's it called? The curse of knowledge, if you're familiar with this concept, where you spend a lot of time like in depth in the topic, but you kind of lose sight over time of like what is lay knowledge.
Sure.
So
What are your what's everyone's kind of feelings on surveys? Like I've done that before at like the beginning where I'll be like, okay, how many people know what OIDC is, or how many people have implemented OIDC or whatever. And then, it's unfortunate you can't tune a talk that much, right? But you can definitely tune, because you can't change a slide in
Yeah.
the middle of it. But you can definitely spend more time on a slide and realize you're gonna have to cut something at the end. Is that something that you all have used with good luck or with good effect?
Yeah, I've used that, and I think it's great because it helps the audience interact. So I think sometimes they think I'm just like interacting with them, but I'm like, no, I'm just trying to figure out like what level we're at. And it helps me to like you just said, be able to be like, all right, I'm probably not going to explain this, and I'm going to focus more on this section. So I think it's a good tool. And sometimes even before like your talk starts, like let's say like you're just setting up or something like that, and people start sitting in there. A lot of times people don't realize I'm the speaker, so I'll just like I'll just talk with them. I'm like, have you used GitHub Copilot or whatever, or like GitHub Codespaces? And they're like, nah, da da da. And then I'll just go up on the stage. I'm like, okay, cool, I got an idea of who everyone is. And they're like, oh, you're the speaker? I thought you were just here to listen. So yeah.
That's awesome. This is the stealth survey. I love it. That's
yeah,
awesome.
that's really clever. I love that. I want to take a moment to highlight what folks are saying in the chat. For example, Aaron says, depends, especially if you want your talk to be replayed. There's so much to consume, and some advice is like, unfortunately, not as secure as the claim. Yudi says, IRL surveys are also a good way to get the audience involved in the talk, which is true. I like that interaction aspect. Aaron says, if it's a smaller audience, I do love it, but larger audience tend to stay away from and offer a list of resources via a QR code. And Aaron agrees with you, Rizèl, about your tactic. So my thing about asking questions to help level set at the beginning would be not to be not to play the other side, but to sort of be to question like, what is the purpose of that survey, right? To level set. So let's say there's 100 people in the audience, and one of them doesn't lift their hand because they don't know what OIDC is. What then, right? So I do use them to engage, and I think it's great to do so, but I'll throw it out anyway. Because, for example, I don't know if somebody's watching a replay, and then the thing about asking those is that in the replay, there's just a little moment, especially if it's an in-person conference, then there's a little moment of, so can I get a hands up of, okay, I'll give an example. Like
Sure.
who's heard of JWTs before? And there's a little moment of, cool. Yeah. Okay. Most of you, which is
Right.
good. It's not, it's like for in person, it's a good interaction model, but I wonder how helpful that is for a replay. So I think it's good to have, but to define anyway, just for like completeness' sake.
Yep. That's interesting. That kind of plays back into what we talked earlier about the different modes of interaction with online versus offline conferences, and kind of how it's different things. So cool. That's a good point.
And
Because
oh,
yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say, did KCDC have replays?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
Yeah, I definitely know they didn't make a video of my talk last year, but I don't know about what their general policy is.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Sorry, Ramon, you were talking.
No. I was just thinking out loud. So this is a conversation. But what I mean, going back to online talks, what I liked about it there, I forget what platform it was, but I gave a talk once where I couldn't see the chat. But what I really liked was that as I was speaking, I could see reaction emojis flying around the screen, which was fantastic for my little jokes and puns that I'll throw in. It's a nice way to keep me going. So that is an interaction and model as well that is, I think, worth taking into consideration again for the live portion. Learners asking AirMeet or Remo. Maybe this was 2 years ago. I'm afraid I can't remember. I'm sorry. AirMeet rings a bell. Might be that. Anyway, yeah, I think taking that into consideration, like just because it's an advanced talk doesn't stop you from having a certain level of thoroughness.
That's a good point.
I try to think of them like if I were writing I tend to structure talks as I would a blog post, in terms of like just adding a bit more of a story threads in between. In fact, if I may, I'm just going to recommend a talk I always do by Saron Yitbarek on it's called Your Perfect Tech Talk. Your Perfect Tech Talk. Should have done this before. Here we go. Grab that link. I'm going to throw it in. Yeah, Platypus with Cheese puts it really well. If you ask a question and everybody knows, say some words about it anyway. Yeah. For going into a specific topic. But yeah, this talk by Saron is really cool because it really expands into like how we can, talk about complex tech topics, but how to avoid those sounding like a blog post. And the factor there is you as a human being giving your related ideas to that. Not that a blog post is bad, but like it's sort of the motivation behind like what is the difference between a blog post and a talk. This is an interesting. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No worries. I was saying that makes sense.
Yeah. A learner says Saron Yabarek's podcasts are awesome. They really are. She's really cool. Yeah. So, and I love this idea that you're going to be going through, like, correct me if I'm wrong, introducing the problem at hand, which is authentication. What is it? How do we go about it? How do we handle these different scenarios where we might need it? Where do we differentiate it with, say, and I could be going off here, so please stop me if I'm wrong. Where do we draw the line between authentication and authorization? For example, that might be off topic, but
yeah. I mean, the way I kind of conceive this is like, an advanced talk, right? So
yeah,
I'll probably nod to authentication, authorization, briefly, but then really can't dig into like 5 or 6 different patterns that I've seen, and maybe do an introduction of like, hey, here's the name of the pattern, here's what it looks like, what the flow is, and here's the problems it solves, and here's the issues that it introduces. And obviously, I have 2 patterns already listed in the abstract, so I absolutely need to make sure I check those boxes, because I think people get peeved when they read something that's not, not truth in advertising. But I have a couple other ones that I've been kind of toying with.
These
And
two, right? Backend for frontend and identity broker.
yep.
Yeah, put those in there. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no worries. So yeah, so I've definitely given talks about like different types of authentication and things like that. But for here, I really wanted to like see if I could kind of take a step back and think about like, I mean, again, it's an architecture talk, so people are going to be expecting boxes and arrows and things like that. And that's really what I wanted to do, as well as kind of draw from my end goal, what I'd love for people to walk out from this talk and say is, oh, well, I don't know. This may be dating myself, but you all ever, has anyone on the chat, or have you all read the Gang of Four book, Design Patterns?
I have it, but I think my sister has it.
Yeah.
I read it. I think I bought it for university. I don't think I've read it.
So I read it like the first job out of school, and
Yeah,
it's all about like just a set of things that you understand when someone else uses it. It's like an abstraction layer on top of language. And so I'm not the first person to have thought of these abstraction layers either, but that's why I want my audience to come away with is say, oh, in a year, I'm going to run across this particular situation. This is a good pattern to solve that problem. And these are the trade-offs that come with that pattern. That's my ideal.
I like that. That kind of feels like something you can refer back to.
The Gang of Four is the goal.
The goal. I mean, the Gang of Four book as well as a design basis for that, if I'm not
Sure.
mistaken.
Sure.
I like that. I like that. So like as Lerner says here, a case by case analysis of different architectures or patterns.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how in depth, like down to like not like a full case study that you might read in like Harvard Business Review or something like that. But yeah, I'd love to be able to say, um, this is where we've seen our clients use, or we have used the back end for front end pattern. And, this is great because it, and I could jam on back end for front end if we want right now, but that's the idea, is to really kind of dig in deep. I have, if I pick 5 patterns, I have 10 minutes for each pattern. That's a lot of time, assuming like 5 minutes for intro and 5 minutes for kind of,
True.
outro. So that's kind of the way I've been thinking about this talk.
And I think for the flow, what you're definitely going to want to do there, and I mean, I'm just assuming, I'm kind of assuming you already have thought of this, but having a very similar pattern for each of those, like a similar structure. I mean, for each, they kind of feel like mini talks.
Sure.
Oh, if I were asking KCDC to put this up on, say, YouTube or something, I'd love to suggest chapters for it.
Sure.
You know how you can have a YouTube chat. Yeah.
Or frankly, I could probably reuse some of this for a meetup talk or something like that, where it's just like picking 2 of the patterns and talking about like, if they have themes, which I'm pretty sure they will have themes. So
You bring up an excellent point there, because going by patterns like this makes the talk extremely reusable. And by reusable, I mean regivable.
Totally.
Learners asking, could I watch this talk online? And Rizèl answered, I don't remember KCDC recording my talk online, but hopefully they'll record our talks this year. Yeah, that'd be super cool. I'd love to watch this. But that's I think that's an interesting point to touch on, and I think this is more for folks who are interested in getting into public speaking. Like, absolutely reuse talk. Whoops.
So this is actually interesting. So I talked to somebody who I consider to be a prominent person,
Yeah.
and she said she's never given the same talk twice, and I have given the same talk like 40 times. And granted, they weren't all at conferences; they were a lot to meetups and smaller groups. But like, I think that doesn't, I mean, one talk I'm thinking about in particular is about JSON Web Tokens, and I give it, and it's totally technology agnostic because you can use them across all different kinds of platforms. And then at the very end, I have like 2 slides I swap out, right? Like if I'm giving to a Ruby group, it's gonna be different than if I'm giving to a Java audience.
True.
But I can give the same exact talk, and the people, they don't care because they're learning and it's a really polished talk. And I've gotten to the point now, frankly, where I can just give that talk. If you give me 15 minutes notice right now, I could give that talk because I just need to change out a slide or two and
Yep.
read through it to make sure I don't forget anything, and it's good. So advice for the audience, if you're looking at public speaking, like digging deep into it, like a cross top, what's the word, like a horizontally integrated talk where it's about like an editor or it's about Git, you're gonna be able to give a Git talk to any user group anywhere because people will love it. And it will be it's not technology specific, and you'll put in about the same amount of effort for the talk you give twice versus or once versus the talk you give 40 times if you want to do that.
Yeah. I can't believe someone never gave the same talk more than twice. I mean, sometimes I like try to submit other CFPs, but people just keep picking the same one, and I feel like I'm like, okay, sure. I feel like it's gotten more refined. I've been able to like kind of what you said, add and remove a couple things depending on the audience, and I feel like it can give it now. If I had 15 minutes, and there's different people in the audience, so it doesn't. I don't think it hurts.
Totally.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I have to agree. Like, I'm definitely more on the side of I'm struggling to think of a talk that I've only given once, unless it never got accepted again. But I can't think of one. But yeah, I mean, your mileage may vary, of course, from topic to topic, or sorry, from conference to conference, or like talk to talk. But I'd even go as far as to say why I would even encourage it, because if you get, especially if you're giving a talk in person, you're like people who travel a lot and go to a lot of conferences. I and this is a statistic I'm going from instinct, though that isn't really representative of what the majority of the audience is, who are going to the conference in their area because it happens to be in their area. So going to giving a talk in, say, I don't know, Chile, or in North America or Central Europe, like, you're gonna have folks who have never seen that talk, heard of the topic, heard of you, like all of that. So I think it's definitely worth considering. And Joshua says hi. Hey, Josh, good to see you. But yeah, cool. Let's see, what else can we cover here? We've got patterns, problems, issues, architecture diagrams. I think for a general structure, like if you're gonna have 5-ish patterns, that's already looking like a solid amount of content for a 1 hour slot with some flexibility built in.
Yeah. I'm done, right? Is that all we have to do? Like, oh wait, no. Yes, I'm just trying to think about like other questions I had.
Please.
I think that at this point, it really is about identifying the patterns and kind of thinking about them, and determining whether I can get 10 minutes of content out of a pattern, right? Because some of these patterns, again, this gets back to the curse of knowledge, right? Like some of these patterns
Yeah.
seem kind of obvious or intuitive to me. An example is, to me, there's a pattern of, if any of you have logged into something, you may see where they just ask for your username or email first, and then they'll like direct you. It'll like the password box will show up, right? This is called identifier first, and it actually allows you a lot of flexibility as an authentication provider because there may be people that have their business is paying for their version of the application, or it's a nonprofit, or they may have certain requirements around. We have some clients that come to us and say, we only want our employees to be able to log in using Google, but we want our customers to use whatever they want to do. And if you kind of have that intermediary screen, then it opens up flexibility. Is there 10 minutes of conversation about that particular pattern? I don't know. And I probably won't know until I kind of, diagram it out, talk about where it's useful. So it may be actually 10, 10 patterns too, right? I just don't, I don't know until I've done the work of actually kind of breaking that out and probably outlining it first.
Yeah, and I think. Oh, sorry, Rizal, I interrupted.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't finish my thought in my head yet. So go ahead. And
You're totally good. I was just gonna say, like, I think your point of not knowing until you write it is, of course, going to help, is going to be a question mark until you actually do it. But I think going at it from a structured perspective of like, okay, because I think any pattern that we look at is going to have a certain degree of newness to different members of the audience.
Mm.
So treating all of them equally could be really helpful here. Again, that's not because you do have an hour, and then and again, it doesn't hurt you to be thorough in that respect. So that doesn't. So finding the way to mitigate, and please forgive me for my wording, being not condescending, but talking down to an audience is by being pragmatic about being like, look, this is a talk. We're going to structure it like this, and we're going to treat everything the same way. Again, thank you for forgiving me, Josh. Um, um, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, just treating all of them equally gives you that space to be as thorough as you like.
Mm. Mm.
As Lerner says, finding a middle ground between being too technical and too, going to high level, I think.
Makes sense. Thank you, Lerner.
yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like you could take 10 minutes on each of them. Like, kind of like with the structure we have here that you said, like, what's the name of the pattern and have like an image or animation of like how it's working. That way, while you describe how it works. Because I don't know, for some reason,
Hmm.
when people describe things to me, I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about, even if they like described it really simply. So if there's like some kind of like image or something, I'm like, oh, okay, I've seen that before. And then
Mm.
like we just talked about like putting the use cases on when you've like maybe one or two use cases of how you've seen customers use that in the past, and then like again like we said the trade-offs, and like then you show like how it's architected, and like I feel like all of that should take around 10 minutes. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Great.
And wondering out loud, might slash could it be helpful to have a final-ish slide of like, here are some other patterns that you might see out in the wild that, depending on how much time you have left, you can dedicate as much time as needed to that. So just to be
Mm.
like, let's say you're a little bit behind time and like, oh, here's some more patterns you can check out. Here's a link, blah, blah, blah. Or if you have the time, you could just be like, and we can look at this one and this one and so on and so on. Um, Josh says, "I love the good flexible closer slide." Yeah, I think it's helpful, and that kind of gives you that space to iterate on it. This, of course, may vary on how you know. I've been talking to a friend lately a lot about like improvising and how much they don't like it compared to somebody who might like it more. I think if you can plan for it, for those two scenarios, if you're not very keen on improvising, that gives you that flexibility to be able to I'm going to use quote marks here, improvise.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I think all of these are things that I am familiar enough that if I just had one slide in a couple minutes, I could probably not BS about it, but like talk
Mm,
at some level about it, right? Like, so I
yeah.
love the idea of having those as kind of backup, basically. Like, so if I get through, I think every pattern is going to take 10 minutes and I practice to that timing and it seems like that makes sense. And then, um, I get nervous or something happens and they each take 9 minutes. Well, I still have some buffer at the end so I don't get someone coming up to me at the end of this talk and saying, hey, I wish it'd been 60 minutes. So that makes sense to me. Love the idea.
Awesome. Well, we're at the top of the hour, but we did start a little late, so I don't want to like cut us off. But I also want to make sure that I'm not cutting into anybody's time here. I'd love to ask: is there anything else that we might want to chat about here that we might have not covered yet?
Not cutting into my time. by the way.
Much appreciated. I mean, it's the evening for me, so I'm more flexible. But still, I
Sure.
want to, I don't have a work day right now.
I mean, I think this is a great start, right? I think, and to get back to the point of the whole stream, right? Like, this is, uh, I could, if we wanted to, I could dig into like an example of a pattern, but there are things that I probably couldn't do right now, right? Like, I'm not gonna be able to create a diagram in the next couple of minutes. And describing diagrams is a poor way to spend any time, in my experience. So, um, I think this is a great foundation for me to go back and like now, blow out these patterns, like, this section of for the 5 or 6 things that I've been kind of top of mind for the last couple of years, and then run through it, right? And talk it through and see how that feels in terms of timing. And I don't know about you all, but whenever I talk through a talk, whether I talk through an outline, that generates more things that I want to like add to the outline and add to the notes. So that'd be my next step, is to really turn this into um, a full-fledged outline, and then put it into a slide deck after that.
Yeah.
I want to highlight a question from Learner here that I found interesting. But there's a bit of a concern with how you might want to set up the right context. Oh, you know what, Dan? I just realized the questions are blocking your face. That's not fun. There we go. To use an older movie context, you're getting Mike Wazowski'd, and that's not fun. um, yeah, I'm not sure. Learner, could you try rephrasing that question? Because I'm not sure I fully follow. Does anybody gets?
I'm not sure either.
I wonder if
yeah. I'm curious if you're talking, Leonard, about the context of the pattern or the context of the whole talk. I'm not sure which context you're referring to.
Yeah, could you give that another shot, please? And of course, anybody else who's watching who's curious about either the talk itself or like some points on like creating an outline for this, please feel free to jump in. That's why this is a stream. So Learner says pattern
use, I think.
Pattern use. Sorry.
I read wise too. My bad.
My
pattern
bad.
wise. Maybe you.
Because we did the whole talk earlier.
Are you talking about the previous stream where there was?
No, I think we were talking about the whole. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, Learner. I think this is about. Okay, so we've outlined like how the entire talk will flow, but how do we want to set the right up context for each pattern's use and avoiding going too much in depth? Which is a super valid question. I think that's what we're kind of trying to set up here in this section. So going like, okay, this is the name. Where are we using it? What are the issues introduced? Like, what are the pros and cons of this pattern? What problems it solves? What issues it creates? Are you talking perhaps about like, say, a demo or an example? Because that's an interesting point. That probably, just gut feeling, would be a lot of overhead for creating the talk. And I think that's where the diagrams would sort of solve this issue.
Either diagrams or, frankly, actually, now I think about it, real world examples that people are familiar with, right? Like, I think that if you can add that in where, obviously a big audience, not everyone's going to be familiar with everything, but pretty much everyone's logged in with Google.
Yeah.
Right. So if I can think about something that is like that, that might be a really helpful way to ground it. Because I think Learner, and I might be putting words in your mouth here, but it feels like authentication, as Rizèl mentioned, is kind of this abstract thing most developers don't really care or think about that much anyway. And now we're layering abstraction on top of that. So what can I do to bring it back to the concrete? Is that kind of addressing your comment, Learner?
Think so. They wrote yes, right? Or maybe the yes was
the yes was about clarifying the question. So please do let us know. But this kind of makes me think of like, what if I'm a big fan of consistency? What if that real world example is consistent? I don't. I'm throwing out
Okay.
ideas like, um, if you create a metaphor that is persistent throughout the talk, like say, you know, um,
Interesting.
trying to enter a building,
No worries,
different kind.
learner. No worries.
Oh,
It's good to get your feedback.
sorry, I'm just a fresh. No, hey, like we're all learning here, learner. Yeah, totally.
Mm.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Um, like I wonder if that would simplify things too much.
Another option might be to like build up an application. If I could figure out how to use all these patterns in one application,
Hmm.
Ooh.
and be like, okay, we're starting out with this application, and now we're going to add this pattern to solve this problem, and then we're going to add. So it's a made up application, right? Like it's a, I don't know, I love Corey Quinn's Twitter for Pets or something like that, right? And then you just start to add on pieces. I have to think about that in terms of the patterns, whether that makes sense, but
Hmm.
it might be an interesting approach.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually like that. I mean, it sounds like a lot of work, but you have time, I guess, because the talk's not until June.
Yeah.
And if you do like it is a one time lift. So if you do give the talk more than once, you've got a pre-made thing there. However, if I may recommend, just throwing out advice here, if you are going to let people play around with that as well, please do so at the end of the talk, so that people like me who are easily distracted do not spend the entire time playing around with the different patterns at the beginning.
Sure.
That is something I'm very guilty of. Um, Archetype.io says, adding something concrete makes sense to me. I'd definitely be lost. Auth is probably the kind of thing that is a big part of the work of some devs and not at all familiar to most others. I'm sure there's some middle ground and but there are extremes as well. And so um, I think and going back to what we were talking about before, I think the idea of making this into a reusable resource you can come back to for patterns is being like, oh, this is the, what did you call it? Sorry, I'm bad at remembering these names. Back end for front end, for example. Oh yeah, this has that back end for front end look. Joshua says, +1 about being scared by all things. I know all code is approachable and understandable by humans, but auth is an area that has intimidated me a lot and feels less approachable. And I think that's where that distinction of what is advanced is going to be super interesting to align to toe, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Learners asking, is docs in Spanish? Yes, my browser's in Spanish. Please disregard at least the content's in English. Sorry, I keep forgetting to put my browser in English for streams.
Awesome.
All good. We learn a little Spanish while we watch you, so it's all good.
See, we all get something. Yeah, but auth is scary to many. That is a great point of feedback there, like making authentication more approachable.
Yeah. I almost think it's okay to lean on the beginner approach more, because already authentication's an advanced topic for most developers. So I feel like the amount of advanced auth experts in the audience is going to be a little bit low.
Makes sense, especially at a general dev conference. There are definitely conferences I could think of going to where there would be people that are like on the standards body who would like be in the audience asking questions, but that probably won't happen at KCDC, or not very many, I would guess. So that's a good point.
I want to read this comment from Archetype.io. It's definitely so hard to stay neutral on what's advanced within your own field. When I'm writing TypeScript types, I sometimes forget I know TypeScript doesn't mean I'm used to implementing arbitrary logic using generics. Yeah, I believe you. But and that goes back to this curse of knowledge thing we were talking about. Like, what is advanced to me is probably not advanced to others. So I think that's going to be really interesting for figuring out, you know, what is too advanced and what isn't, and what is advanced. Because I think, and that's why I'm a big fan of like consistent advancedness throughout a talk, right? So even if a pattern is super familiar, keep that consistent. Yeah.
Yeah. And have you, well, maybe this is more work for you too. Have you Have you written these in blog post or anything? Because sometimes it helps me to like write a similar topic that I was going to do a talk for, but in blog post form. That way I like have a better structure in my mind of like the beginning, middle, and end. And then I also have a better understanding of how people react to it. Like if in the comments people are like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, okay, I probably should for the talk explain this part a bit more versus like another. I don't know. But that's also more work. Like in addition to creating architecture, now you gotta write a blog post. So
Yeah, it's actually funny. I actually went the other way with the Web Authn talk I gave last year, where I took the talk and I just right after I'd given it at the conference, I just recorded it myself, and then I turned that into a blog post,
Ooh,
a
that's
couple of
smart.
blog posts. But I love the idea of doing that. I just don't know whether I'll have time to do
Yeah,
that.
that's
So,
how I figure. I'm like, it's a lot of work. And you're head of DevRel, so I'm sure you've got things.
well, we're all busy, right? So, but that would be fun. I love the idea. I've definitely so I told you that Letters to New Developer back at the beginning was a book, and people have talked to me since then and said, "Oh, what's it like to write a book?" And I always say, start out and write 10 titles for blog posts. If you can't get to 10 titles for a blog post about a book you want to write, nonfiction, not fiction. Fiction's a different world, but write 10 titles and then write 10 blog posts. And if you can't get the energy and the excitement to get through 10 blog posts, you don't want to write a book. Trust me.
Yeah.
So I love that idea, and that's actually a good idea for other people who are thinking about public speaking. Is you can take a blog post or a series of blog posts and turn them into a talk pretty easily, and it's a way to, like you said, get feedback from people, even get feedback from yourself, right? Because when you write something down, you can't lie to yourself in the way that you can when it's like PowerPoint or notes. So
I like that. That's good advice of the 10 blog posts.
Cool. Now I want to be very aware of the fact that we're using up lots of your time. I just want to say thank you both so much for doing this with me as always. Rizèl, it's such a joy to have you. Dan, do you know when KCDC is going to be off? It's like something in June.
yeah, mid-June, I want to say.
Yeah. Throwing it out there. If you'd like to come on again and give the talk, I mean, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, Rizèl, but I hope it's okay to offer that we do it. I think it'd be fun. And folks, if you are watching live and you'd like, or if you're watching offline as well, if we decide to put this up on YouTube, that's up to Dan. If you want to join in and practice your talks, brainstorm a talk, all of this, please, please, please get in touch. Rizèl is at Black Girl Bites on Twitter. Dan, I hope it's okay if folks want to get in touch with you. They can
Yeah,
do
of
so on Twitter.
course. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's more DS.
Yep, more DS.
And cool. And I'm at Hola Soy Milk. So, folks, again, thank you so much. It's been a joy. And thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
See you all next time. Bye.